Denys Gurak. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us. Denys Gurak is the Deputy Director General of Ukroboronprom, the state arms manufacturer. So a recently published RAND report kind of criticized Ukroboronprom for a lack of transparency and conflict of interest. So basically, the question is, there are still a lot of questions within the Ukroboronprom sector. And you guys say that weapons procurement is supposed to be secret, but the trouble is that if that's secret, you don't have as much accountability for what your company does to the public. And so, do you think that's fair?
Thank you, first of all, for coming and for possibility to explain the specifics, actually, of the defense procurement in Ukraine, because that's an opportunity to break some stereotypes, especially for the international audience, and especially for the international partners with which we work. First of all, the procurement is done by the MOD or other militarized authorities. We act as our manufacturers, the facilities themselves, sale directly to the militarized authorities, and so that's the first stereotype. Everybody portrays us as an intermediary between the production facility manufacturer and the client. So that's not the fact, and that's first thing. Second thing is that well, it's not for us to decide whether it should be secret or not. My personal point of view that there should be a transparency and public scrutiny for all things that are logical to be published. There's definitely things that should be kept secret, and that's normal practice worldwide. If to speak about imports, which was heavily criticized by RAND, actually a very authoritative and renowned analytical think tank in US, everything what was written there on defense industry is very logical, is very necessary to accomplish. Just two minor corrections on imports. Because we don't act as a procuring agency. We act as procuring agency for the MOD. We don't decide what should be imported or not. This became a fact. This became a practice for the last 2.5 years since the conflict started, only because of the simple fact that there should have been a critical imports in the very beginning of the conflict, and we were the ones who established it. So,
but you must understand that a lot of Ukrainian taxpayers put their money towards funding the military.
Sure.
So, what sort of steps does Ukroboronprom take to ensure that these figures are open to the public?
Although we are still not obliged by law to publish reports, we still do it since the very beginning of this new management team, part of which I am, which came in 2014. We're doing it on a half-a-year basis. As for the reform, we announced a month ago officially launching of corporatization of our enterprises, which means that they would become public companies, shareholding companies, which in its own turn would provide for much more better transparency, which is a clear legal mechanism for outside investors to work with us and to have us to view us as a reliable partner.
Do you find that foreign investors are actually interested in cooperating with Ukroboronprom, or are they actually put off by all this Ukrainian legislation and red tape that they have to go through?
Yeah, we are on a day-to-day basis actively lobbying for changes of legislation. We had ourselves launched around 12 or 15 draft laws through the government to the parliament for changing and reforming and doing necessary steps that are which we require desperately even yesterday. The complexity of Ukrainian decision-making process and the legal system, if to speak diplomatically. And for people like me, it's kind of frustrating working in the system and explaining to everybody some obvious things that should be done.
Of course. I mean, there's been a lot of talk over the authority within Ukroboronprom. So can we ask you, how much authority does Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko currently have over Ukroboronprom?
He appoints Director General of Ukroboronprom according to the law, which was adopted in 2011.
So it seems that Rand's suggestions were they quoted as saying that there are ambiguities and divisions within the defense sector, and this includes the kind of managing and authority, that there's no clear difference between who's in charge, the cabinet ministers or Poroshenko, basically.
Is that a fair assessment?
They slightly touched this issue, and the idea of the reform actually is one of the issues in the reform strategy which we presented, is also clear division of responsibilities, because for us it's also an issue. It's an internal management issue, internally governmental management issue, and actually in their report, Rand touched heavily on the subject that there is a lack of coordination between agencies in Ukraine, and my day-to-day job, I agree with this completely, and that's the first thing which we need to desperately solve. So that's what is my main aspiration as a first thing to do. Secondly, what needs to be done is, I already touched about it, is elimination of some stereotypes.
So you think that your company gets a lot of false reports?
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand why is it happening. Is because Ukraine originally had a reputation of a gray armament dealer on a worldwide market due to objective things that happened actually for 25 years since Ukraine independence, which was selling off the military stock.
Right.
Which
Ukraine has always been like one of the top arms exporters, but
and it still is.
Exactly. But where does the money go now? From
the sales of all these exports. I mean, is it
to the state
publicly
budget,
available again?
We for the last 2 years, according to our 2-year report, which was published in July 2016, we paid more than 8 billion UA hryvnia in salaries. We paid a lot of taxes, if I'm not mistaken. This is the percentage of the taxes that we pay is around 30% of the general revenue. So it's a very big
a lot of money,
indicator.
then.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. We pay a lot of taxes. We have very small margins from revenue margins from our internal customers, the MOD, National Guard, etc. So the most margin we get from export, which is a clear strategy of protection of national interest.
Perfect. Well, Mr. Gurak, thank you very much for coming on the show.